The feeders. Who are the feeders? Happiness, anger, sorrow, fear, emotions that guide our thoughts and actions. They can keep a person struggling to live, and they can drag us down to our doom. There is power in emotion, both good and bad, and nothing feels emotion harder than humans. Our dreams, our ambitions, our nightmares, they can have an impact on the reality around us. And there are things that desire that power, creatures and items that feed off the emotions of others. It is vital to them as blood is to a person. Today's subject is about the feeders. These creatures spawn in places where something heavily emotional had occurred. Usually it's where tragedy had happened. Usually a brutal murder or a betrayal. Things so brutal that they left an imprint on a place. It is a sensation where a person gets uncomfortable for no tangible reason, especially as they've never been to that location previously. That aura that most people are sensitive to, one that says things very wrong had happened here. Such locations, people tend to not stay long. The unease they felt almost solid, suffocating in its cloying thickness. A blessing for those who read the energy of the room and leave, because the longer one stays, the more likely the risk of a feeder spawning rises, especially so at sites where preternatural events had already occurred. Because of the unusual events that had happened, the area has been primed, making more likely for more anomalous events to occur. So the proper thing to do is to lock down the area and isolate it from the general public. Give it time to bleed away some of the negative energy. But this is about what the feeders do when they do spawn. If they have a potential victim/feeding source nearby, they'll manifest. Most feeders can't manifest in a full tangible room right away. It depends on the emotional impact of their spawning area. Feeders tend to start out as a wisp of shadows, barely seeable by the human eye, drifting from corner to corner, approaching their chosen target. At this stage, they're so weak that a moderately strong light could shred their shadow-like essence. Even doing the things one would do to ward away ghosts and phantoms are equally as effective on feeders at this stage. Toss some salt, say a prayer, and just like that, the area will become less tense, less fearsome. Because nature abhors a vacuum, and humans are good feeding areas of negative energies with their own positive emotions, things that are constantly overflowing within their mortal bodies. Again, emotions have power. But if caught off guard, if the person didn't banish the feeder in time, if that small drifting shadow got a chance to latch on, the creature will merge with its prey's shadow, and slowly it'll begin to feed. Not on the person's body, but rather their emotions. It'll act like a leech does when it latches onto a host to parasite off of, a numbing agent that'll keep the person from really noticing that they're feeling anything wrong. They'll act a little more tired, a little less even-tempered. Emotions will surge, not naturally, but because the feeder is gaining strength. As it does so, it'll force that person to feel deeper and deeper emotions. None of the positive ones. It doesn't like to eat those, but anger, sorrow, grief, depression, all the emotions that can drag a person down to the deepest pit. Again, like a leech or a tick, as a feeder gorges itself on victims' emotional capacity. It'll get strong and bloated, as it isn't a ghost but rather a creature. So as it gets fuller and fuller, it'll start to manifest a more physical form. Have you ever looked at your shadow and saw that it looked odd? Like it had more texture and seemed darker than usual? If so, it's a very good chance that you've been latched onto by a feeder, even though the signs of being attacked are somewhat hard to notice, aside from the mental effects, like getting rid of a leech, tick, or small parasites. Getting rid of a feeder that latched on is easy. The easiest way, early, when it latches on, is to take a salt bath. The hotter the better. Self-care regimen for mental health will have similar effects to getting rid of the parasite. Another thing that a person can do is to go to a room that has lights on, pointed in the center, get rid of your shadow, and there'll be nothing for the feeder to latch on. Again, these steps are only if you notice the feeder early. As it grows stronger and as it feeds, it'll soon gain the ability to manifest. Usually, it does so by combining its victim's nightmares into a tangible form, something that'll horrify and terrify the victim, producing more emotions for the victim to feed with. Worse, It'll look like a mental break because the form at this stage is only visible to the victim, a waking nightmare and hallucinations that will cause them to freak out and doubt their sanity. Creeping shadows and nightmares encroaching at the edges of their vision. Personal demons made real by a creature slowly sucking at your mental fortitude, wearing down a person's sanity until they can no longer resist, no longer fight against the abyss that is drawing them. And when the person can no longer fight, no longer summon the will not to be depressed, the feeder will make its final action, sliding into the person's body, hollowing out their personality, memories, everything that they can get its grip on, turning the person into a walking zombie, going through the motions of life, unable to feel anything but the creeping darkness. Every ember of hope being snatched and consumed by a parasite that ran rampant. It's not uncommon for feeder victims to get to this stage to lose their lives, either by taking it themselves or just not caring enough to do vital things like feed themselves. And even death isn't a release, because those who lose their lives to a feeder most of the time will become one themselves, a fragment of who they were, having lost everything to misfortune and misery. And without the host, the feeder will rapidly shrink into a fragment of a shadow and move on to its next victim, constantly hungry, constantly feeding, now joined with a partner who's just as starving, always searching for an end to their suffering.